The Ktunaxa have been here since the creation of time. In fact, our creation story talks about how the animals, when they were first given the responsibility and told that humans would be coming along, and how we'd have a responsibility to protect each other and to support each other.
Our village of Splatsin was because we're the southern tip of the Shishwapnepulu, the Shishwap Nation, and then our neighboring boundaries with the Okanagan. At one time we had a major village before smallpox came through. Being a border tribe, we're up into almost the 10,000 in population.
A long time ago there was no border, and our territory being the Syilx speaking territory. My grandmother talked about places like Revelstoke and other places like that, and how that whole valley was used by us. Our history and the knowledge of the land is thousands of years.
We had training areas, which was very important to teaching our youth how to survive on the land. Because when the land was first created for our coming, as human beings of this land, our foods were not just grown in one place. There was a lot of teachings about who we are, how we take care of the land, how we honor the fish, how we honor the plants. They all had a story of their own. And that's how we got our teachings. We're stewards of this land. That's who we are.
We have a unique connection to our territory, which is our homeland. We didn't come from anywhere else. When I hear people sometimes talk, they talk about the old country. We don't have an old country, we just have our homeland. The Columbia Basin, we describe the waterways. That's one thing that is very clear within the creation story. It talks about the waterways that exist within the basin and talks about the role and the ultimate outcome of the story is human beings.
When Coyote prepared the lands, he carried the salmon up the Columbia. That's why the Columbia River was so rich with salmon, because he was the one that brought the salmon. If that does not tell you how important the salmon is to our people.
When you start looking at anthropology and you start looking at what people call traditional territories or areas of interest, it's all dependent on fish. Every First Nation in the Southern Interior was dependent on the fishery.
Our people have been a salmon culture for thousands of years, way back before there was any white men in the area, or actually before Jesus Christ was born. We inhabited these lands. We're documented down in the Kettle Falls area as long as 10,000 years ago. Kettle Falls was a great fishery. Me being Snklipan, our people migrated south to utilize that fishery, and tribes came from miles and miles around to do trading and to get their fair share of fish.
There was a time when the salmon just didn't come. Well, of course, that's when the Coulee Dam was put in Washington State. So before the dam, the salmon actually came right to the headwaters of the Columbia. That's where they started from.
The building of the Coulee Dam also, it flooded. It flooded a big area, and when the Coulee Dam was built, salmon could no longer come up the river. Talk about a devastation to the people.
They had certain times that they did activities, and so there was time when people would gather to fish. And so all the people came from all the different directions, ended up around what's today known as Canal Flats, around that area. Showed up there and they waited and waited, and no fish ever came. And the main dam that was built, of course, was the Grand Coulee Dam. But there was no recognition at all about the Ktunaxa people and about the impact that it would have on us, or the other Aboriginal people over in the West Kootenay, the Syilx and the Okanagans.
Well, without question, again,
The imposition of the dams on the Columbia River deeply impacted the indigenous peoples within the Arrow Lakes territory to the point where many of the indigenous peoples were forced out of the area.
I was just a teenager when the mica was being built, and I know that it really affected the hunting grounds. That's where the woodland caribou were also associated with our quisp, and in that area was way more plentiful. I guess they're kind of like really decimated now, but that was one of the major areas where, you know, where the caribou was hunted, and the elk were hunted, and of course moose. It did create a real big difference in some of the herds that our people continued to use. Not just us, but the Shuswap people as well.
We have archaeological sites that are underwater. You know, again, our history forever changed so that, you know, access to ancient villages, ancient places, you know, they don't exist anymore because they're underwater because of a dam, because of a relationship that we have with the nation state south of the 49th.
Arrow Lakes was our waters where we practiced various ceremonies. When you build a dam, you displace water, and when you displace water, you displace everything under it. And what it doesn't cover, it washes away. There's untold things and damage that has been done to the lands and the roots, the medicines.
When those lands were flooded, they did not consider what damage it would do to the Native people's villages, to the Native people's sweat lodges. And they did not do it by consulting the people. There were burial grounds which I know people protested loud and clear, but they were not heard.
Let's say we've been fishing in an area for 1,000 years, and now all of a sudden it's 30 feet underwater. The fish aren't going to be, the migratory patterns change, so the fish aren't necessarily going to be in that spot. There's customary practices, there's stories, there's the language, there's learning the local knowledge of that area. That's all lost, because you know what? We're not going back there anymore because the fish are gone. The whole reason we were going there was because of a resource, and our society, you know, really revolved around the fish, right? So you lose that, you lose a lot of your culture.
The opportunity that affords us in terms of the upcoming dates of 2014 and 2024, we are working very diligently to ensure that our voices are heard this time, that we want to ensure that we do have the opportunity for input and we do have the opportunity to have some discussions around those previous impacts and what it's done to us as a people.
The collaboration between the Syilx people, the Colville Confederated Tribes, with respect to the incredible success story of reestablishment of Okanagan sockeye into our river systems, demonstrates the benefits of going back and addressing wrongs that have happened in the past, and work together in a very collaborative fashion to right those wrongs and create a better future.
I expect that there's going to be complete, open, and transparent kind of negotiations that our nation will be participating in. And you know, I have a lot of faith in our leaders, and I know that they'll represent our interests very well.
This next time when we do it, let's do it right, and let's include the ecosystem, because as I said before, it's not just going to benefit us, it will benefit everybody up and down the river.
as we move forward into the future in an effort to renew the Columbia River Treaty and address those impacts, mitigate those impacts, we must ensure that, it's inclusive and that all interests are taken into consideration.
British Columbians are starting to hear our voice, and that's a positive. And one thing that we all have in common is we all have children and future generations.